link at the end. You'll receive a link at the end to give us an evaluation, and that will also yield a certificate of participation. So we'll be sharing that again at the end. Thank you so much for putting in that information. I want to know what brings you joy too. Someone saying my family, camping. Ooh, Boca Raton. Yeah, the sunset would give me joy there as well. Beautiful place. Houston. Awesome.
Oh, just returned from Yellowstone.
Nice. Very nice. Rain. Someone said rain would give me a lot of joy. What was that person from? I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland, and we are getting rain. That's for sure. The temperature has dropped about 20 degrees for us. Yeah, Valdosta, Georgia. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. And we'll keep admitting people. Georgia, welcome, Georgia, folks. That's my state. So welcome, 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 everyone. Hi, Delphine. Keep putting in that information because we want to know about you and your agency, your location, and what brings you joy. Oh, I love Asheville. I'm originally from North Carolina, but Asheville is simply gorgeous. Welcome. So Lisa, just let us know when we're about to rock and roll. We're going to keep admitting people. Kindness brings me joy. James, I love that.
Nice.
Midlothian, Virginia, near Richmond. I travel that way heading south on 95 to my hometown. Yes, Harbor Beach, Florida. Vero Beach, beautiful areas. Austin, folks from Austin, we're keeping Austin weird, right? Long hikes bring me joy. Great, awesome.
All right, whenever you're ready, Edna, I will keep admitting people, and but we should probably get started.
Yes, we should. Absolutely. So greetings, everyone. My name is Edna Davis Brown. I'm an implementation specialist for the Center for Adoption Support and Education based out of Burtonsville, Maryland. Presenting with me today is my colleague, Lisa Maynard, who is also an implementation specialist with NTI. Just say hello, Lisa.
Hello.
Lisa is based out of Rochester, New York, and I'm here in Silver Spring, Maryland. We're also incredibly pleased to have a seasoned NTI champion with us today, Stacy Thomas, who is the Chief Program Officer of Chosen. Stacy will tell you all about Chosen in her portion of this webinar. Today's webinar is entitled Integrating NTI into Child Welfare and Mental Health Practice, Supervision and Coaching Approaches for Knowledge Application and Skill Transfer. I think you all are already telling us a little bit about yourselves in the chat box, and we just thank you so much for that. I think you're all over the country, and we may even have some people from some of the territories, and sometimes we have people from other countries. So we just want to welcome you and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend maybe an hour and a half with us. So let's go over the agenda, Lisa. We're going to talk about the National Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Initiative a bit today. It is a self-paced, free online training funded through the Children's Bureau. We'll talk more about that. But what we're going to do today is of course, we've done our welcome, and you'll hear more about Stacy. We'll give that overview of NTI. going to talk about trauma, attachment, loss, and grief in adoption. Of course, our guest presenter, C.A.S.E, will talk about how Chosen has really implemented NTI and also have used knowledge transfer practices. We'll give you a little bit more information about some of the NTI tools that's contained within the training. Then we'll share with you how do you get to the training and the implementation options. And throughout, you can put your questions in the chat box. Feel free to do that. We'll be monitoring that. We'd love to hear your comments. And throughout, we'll be asking you questions and posing things that we want you to respond to. So there's a little bit of interaction involved in today's session. So let's go through the learning objectives. Very briefly, because we always want to put these up so we can see how we're doing when we ask you to complete an evaluation at the end. We want you to be able to, we want you to learn the value of adoption competency and NTI to improve adoption competent practice. We want you to be able to gain an understanding of the importance of addressing trauma, attachment, loss, and grief to better meet the needs, the mental health needs, of course, of children. We want you to demonstrate the integration of knowledge and skills emphasized in NTI modules on attachment and loss and grief in day-to-day practice. So we're going to do a little bit of practice today. And of course, assess the benefits of integrating NTI into an organizational training sort of milieu. I always have problems saying that, and access options. So those are the key objectives here. We did have a slide about your role, and I think you're putting that already into your chat box. Feel free to do that if you haven't done so. So we'll know kind of who's on this call and who are we reaching today or who's on this session. So if you'd like to do that, still feel free to do so. So Lisa, let's talk about C.A.S.E and NTI.
Okay, happy to do so. The Center for Adoption Support and Education, or C.A.S.E, was created in 1998 to provide post-adoption counseling and education services to families in Maryland, Northern Virginia, and Washington, D.C. We've got a number of offices around that area and have just opened a couple of new ones as well. C.A.S.E is a private nonprofit adoption services agency, envisioning that everyone touched by foster care and adoption has access to adoption competent services so that they can better educate and support their families throughout the lifetime. The National Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Initiative, or NTI, which we're talking about today, builds on the foundation of C.A.S.E and really looks at the work and the needs of the families that we have been serving for many, many years now. So what do you know about NTI? Does anybody, you could put that in the chat box as well. Have you heard of it? Have you started it? Have you heard of it and didn't really know what it's about and that's why you're here? We love it in Texas. Thank you. Yeah, we heard about it in previous webinars, completed the first training, heard of it through TAC. So you know, we're doing these webinars both for two reasons. One, to make sure that folks across the country know about NTI. Again, it's a web-based, self-paced, and free training for adoption competency. It was funded by the Children's Bureau so far to a tune of about $11 million. So although this is a free training, Edna, I like to say that Edna and I didn't cook this up at the kitchen table one night. It's a really robust, interactive, super high quality training that I think you will enjoy. Alrighty, so what does NTI include? It includes two different tracks, one for child welfare and one for mental health professionals. The child welfare curriculum offers 8 interactive modules. It's about 20 hours with an additional 5 hours for supervisors. And that supervisor component has to do with transfer of learning. So making sure that supervisors have the tools they need to help staff integrate NTI into their day-to-day practice. The mental health curriculum is 30 hours with coaching sessions available, and then I have run coaching sessions across the country. It's got 10 interactive modules, and they're very well aligned and complementary to the child welfare. This is a training for 2 different segments of systems, but very well aligned and very coordinated so that we are really all learning to speak the same language. The mental health curriculum includes new assessment and treatment strategies that are viewed through an adoption lens, and it provides 12 evidence-based treatment interventions. They're not trainings on those interventions, but it gives information on those interventions and gives links and resources to learn more about them. The child welfare curriculum is approved for 20 NASW continuing education credits, 25 if you do the supervisor component, and the mental health curriculum is approved for 25 NASW continuing ed hours as well. So as I said, NTI is really looking to effect system change. We want to see a change for child welfare and mental health professionals so they can work together better to serve adopted children and their forever families. We've worked really hard to support this collaboration through our trainings, through our coaching and supervisor modules, and really working hard in all the states and all the sites that we're in to get both child welfare and mental health practitioners on board. Really what we want to do is really have an impact on permanency for children and families across the country. So why is specialized training needed? Why are we doing this adoption competency stuff? Anybody have thoughts about adoption competency? Okay, there's a difference. What is the difference between mental health and the training in TAC? Oh, great question. So TAC is an 80-hour training, and it requires a graduate degree in order to complete the TAC training. And we're in sites across the country. I think we have maybe 12 or 13 sites right now. NTI is free web-based training. It's more foundational, and it's more foundational because it's only 30 hours instead of 80 hours. So they're very, very similar, lots of similar resources, but the TAC training is more intensive. I train both TAC and NTI and very familiar with it. So I would say NTI is a great foundational training in adoption competency. But we've really heard across the country for many years. I've been working in adoption for over 30 years. I'm an adoptive parent, and really understanding that traumatic life experiences and early losses for our kids they make a difference in their life, in our family life, and in how we get help. And for folks who are seeking therapy, oftentimes the therapist really doesn't have any idea about adoption, but thinks, well, okay, I know loss and grief, so I can do this work. And it's a very, very different thing. And so adoption competency is super important. And we hear this from the families across the country, that therapists who don't have competency in this area oftentimes do more harm than good. And we're trying to alleviate that. The impact of the experiences that children have, entering care through entering foster care because of abuse or neglect, family instability. This compromises their ability to have a healthy, great mental health outcomes for kids. The American Academy of Pediatrics notes that about 40% of youth adopted from foster care are diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, and very high incidence of prenatal drug and alcohol exposure. We see this in children who are adopted from other countries as well, particularly in the Eastern Bloc. NTI addresses adoption across the board, permanency across the board, whether it's permanency through child welfare, through foster care, through international adoption, and infants adopted at birth. The American Academy of Pediatrics also notes that adoptive families utilize clinical services at triple the rate reported by families formed by birth. And again, this makes sense if you think about how kids come into adoptive homes, right? There's a lot of challenges. There's loss and grief, core issues of adoption. And we talk about that in NTI. And to tell us a little bit about transfer of learning and why we're doing this.
Great, happy to do so. So why are we doing this in terms of transfer of learning? I don't know about you. I've been to lots and lots of trainings, and sometimes, even though it's a great training, I think, well, what the heck am I going to do with this? How do I put it into practice? So when we talk about transfer of learning, we are talking about sort of an interrelated series of tasks performed by supervisors, trainers, coworkers, etc., before, during, and after a learning intervention in order to maximize the transfer of knowledge and skills and improve job performance. You know, the NTI gives mental health and child welfare professionals skills, knowledge, and tools, and provide competent mental health services to children, families, etc., built through foster, adoption, and guardianship. So we've worked really hard to support this collaboration between child welfare and mental health people. And I think Lisa talked about that in terms of specialized training. So I'm sorry, I jumped a little bit backwards. So let's move forward here. So it's really about improving job performance. So what do we know? We know that learners lose up to 70% of what we teach them in the first 24 months, right? So that's significant. Less than 10% of training gets successfully transferred into the world, and less than 40% trainees had applied their knowledge of skills and so from the training when measured, say, 90 days after the event. So a lot of it is lost within 90 days. So what we want to do is that while it's frustrating from a training perspective, it's understanding from a brain perspective. You know, we would not want the memory of what someone ate for breakfast on Tuesday to be as important as where the fire extinguisher should be, for example. So the brain sort of picks and chooses what it hangs on to. It's an adaptable and even desirable process. So learning is more than the acquisition of knowledge. It's really about application. So let's connect the dots, Lisa. We know that training can be very costly, requiring a significant amount of time and resources. Of course, we said NTI is free, yet the investment of staff time is significant. So it's important to maximize this big investment by supporting day-to-day practice changes. So think about your goals for training. Think about whether you want to focus on improved practice skills to serve children and families. You want your staff to feel equipped and ready to perform at their jobs. And, you know, we know that learning and interventions are resource heavy, but we also know that it's well worth it if your staff really improves their knowledge and skill applications. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about trauma, about attachment. It's one of the core issues of adoption. So I want you to do a little bit of chatting in the box, so to speak. Type in the chat box your experience. How have you seen trauma impact children and families with whom you work? How have you seen trauma impact the children and families with whom you work? And I see that you're typing some of those in the chat box. attention-seeking behaviors, bonding issues. Yes, absolutely. Children who are in survival mode, developmental delays, disrupts displacement, struggles with boundaries. Yes, yes, yes. So much of an impact that trauma has on attachment and social and emotional development. Thank you so much for that response. Let's talk a little bit about attachment. And really talk about these traumatic experiences that can happen. When we talk about the impact of trauma, they can also initiate a lot of strong emotions, and you guys have already shared those physical reactions. Children may feel terror, helplessness, fear, loss of a whole kinds of physical reactions too, heart pounding, even vomiting. Children experience the inability to protect themselves. So your responses are right on target. Now let's when we talk about attachment, John Bowlby, a British child psychologist and psychiatrist, and Mary Ainsworth, a Canadian American psychologist, provide the most famous body of research offering explanations of individual differences in attachment. So according to attachment theory, created by John Bowlby, attachment patterns are formed in the context of early experiences with caregivers and maintained by later interpersonal relationships in childhood. So over time, attachment patterns become internalized and shape how individuals see themselves and others in close relationships, which in turn influence how individuals perceive and cope with stress throughout the entire lifespan. So Mary Ainsworth identifies 3 categories of infant attachment styles: secure, insecure, and insecure ambivalent. Let me repeat those: secure, insecure, avoidant, and insecure, ambivalent, resistant. So let's dive a little bit deeper in the next slide, Lisa. When we talk about this, they define attachment in these ways. Attachment is a lasting psychological attachment or connection between human beings. Attachment is a lasting psychological attachment or connection between human beings. It may be defined as an affectional tie that one person or animal forms between himself and another, a tie that binds them together in space and time, and we hope certainly that it endures over time. So let's engage in this particular exercise. This is called the adult attachment interview that really gets at what's your attachment style? It was developed in the early 1900s by Mary Main to use in a 6-year follow-up study of parent-child attachment of mothers and fathers who had been tested in the strange situation study at 1 year of age. Most studies, but not all, have found a consistent relationship between AAI classifications, parenting behavior, and child attachment status. So just take a peek at this. For example, if we're talking about our attachment styles, and we'll just have you just read through this. The question here is, list 5 adjectives or phrases to describe your relationship with your mother and father during childhood. If we were doing this face-to-face, we would definitely take some time and engage in this. Why do you think your parents behaved as they did during your childhood? When you were upset as a child, what did you do? What would happen? And, can you give some specific incidents when you were upset, emotionally, physically hurt, etc.? So this interview has about 20 specific questions which explore these experiences. So consider these sort of questions and ask yourself, do you know what your attachment style is? So yes, this is something that you may want to take a look at. It is part of the training. So Lisa, let's talk about brain functioning and building.
Okay, so there are a couple of ways to facilitate attachment. And again, these are embedded in our NTI training. So one of the strategies is called brain building through serve and return. And this might sound really intuitive for most people, but it is not for all. It really is that interaction between parent and child, parent and their baby or young adult, but that sort of back and forth interaction. And the sort of example that's used in the training is singing a song like The Wheels on the Bus. And go to the next slide here. So the song comes on and the wheels in the bus go round and round, and you notice your child or your little one dancing along to the wheels on the bus. The wheels on the bus go round and round. And mom says, "Oh my gosh, look at you, you're dancing. I think you like this song. This song is called The Wheels on the Bus." So you notice and share that child's focus of attention. I see what you're doing. I see that you like this. And the child probably dances a little bit more, sings a little bit more, maybe sings along. And there's this back and forth and back and forth. Return the serve by supporting and encouraging. Oh, let's dance together. Giving it a name. Look what we're doing. This song is called The Wheels on the Bus. And then taking turns, that interaction back and forth. You do the wheels on the bus go round and round, and I'll say the windshield wipers go back and forth. Do you guys remember this song? And so this is that back and forth that goes on in the interaction. It facilitates attachment where we've got eye contact, we've got body movement, we've got attunement, everything like that is going on. And it also gives us a chance to practice beginnings and endings. You notice something, we're going to start that. And then, after the 600th time that The Wheels on the Bus plays, I know that happened a lot when my kids were small. Oh my goodness, if I heard Ode to Joy one more time, I think I would have thrown the recorder out the window. But there's that time where you say, oh, wow, that was so much fun. Okay, now it's bath time, now it's bedtime, whatever it is, finding a way to practice the endings so that you can go on to the next thing. Again, building that interaction, building that attachment. What do you think is happening in this picture? Does this look like a good attachment, good attunement? Not so much, right? What happens when early attunement isn't present? What happens when that's not going on? Yeah, mom is distracted. She's reading the paper, maybe, excuse me, maybe doing a crossword puzzle. But this little guy sitting next to her is in distress. And she's reading the paper with a little bit of a smile on her face. So what does that child feel when mom is not attuned? What's that child feeling? Not feeling seen, not feeling heard, feels alone, feels rejected. Yeah, great. Ignored, stressed, isolated. Great responses. The longer that goes on, the more distressed this child will get, right? And what happens oftentimes if there really is not ever any recognition that the child is distressed, eventually he'll figure out how to soothe himself, maybe fall asleep, maybe start rocking or banging his head. Right? We see this in orphanage children a lot. They find ways to self-soothe because mom isn't doing what she needs to be doing for the child. So not the kind of, the child learns, thank you very much, that the parent will not respond to them. Absolutely. Yeah. So I have to take care of myself. And that's sort of, again, an instinctive thing. But a baby doesn't have great ability to take care of themselves, do they? doesn't set up a great pattern for their whole lifetime. So some ways to encourage attachment. Yeah, the trust bond is broken. Really great replies, folks. Thank you. So there are ways to promote attachment. Responding to that cycle of arousal. When the baby's crying, you notice the baby or the child or the teenager, right? Same is true for teenagers. They need to have that, they have to be known and seen and heard in order to feel valued, to feel worthy, to feel that they have a place in your world, sense of belonging. Initiating positive reactions. Hey, let's go shopping today. Claiming behaviors. Oh my gosh, you know, you're my sunshine, you're my son, I love you so much. You know, just all those claiming behaviors. Look at, we have the same walk. We might not be related by blood, but we sort of walk this in the same way. Kids will pick up on those things. My children were adopted, and it's just really, it's so interesting to me. On the phone, my daughter and I sound very much alike. She's Korean, I'm not Korean. She never spoke Korean, but it's just sort of interesting how we sound so much alike that sometimes my husband will be like, Lisa? And my daughter will say, it's Kristen. So yeah, those claiming behaviors, how are we alike, and making sure we're paying attention to that. We're going to take a look at some of the strategies and evidence-informed therapies embedded in NTI that look at loss and grief. Again, loss and grief are central in families formed through adoption and guardianship. There is loss and grief on the part of everyone, on the part of the children, the biological parents, and the adoptive parents. Everybody has that sense of loss and grief. It happens without us even thinking about it. In adoption, oftentimes we have this ambiguous or unresolved losses that are often hiding underneath what kids often present as a brave or bold exterior, right? They act out, their behaviors become pretty aggressive or excessive. And really what they're doing is they're trying to express how they're feeling, but don't know how to express the grief. NTI focuses on the central role of loss and grief and highlights the importance of and provides strategies for supporting openness, maintaining family connections, finding ways to talk about loss and grief in ways that are really important for kids and families. And again, that ambiguous loss oftentimes is the thing that's hiding underneath and is kind of unrecognized. Ambiguous loss is defined as when a person is physically present, but psychologically unavailable, sort of in that picture that we saw a couple slides ago. Mom is just not available to that baby. Oftentimes this happens when a parent has a substance abuse issue, right? Or mental health issues. It can be when a person is physically absent, but psychologically present, as with a child who is separated from their birth family. They're not with their biological family, but their biological family is in their brain, right? In their hearts, right? Because that's where they came from. Loss is an inherent part of life. We all experience loss. We all will. It's inevitable, right? People come and go. Maybe they move. Maybe we lose people because they get sick and die. It happens. Pets die. Often an early experience of loss is that when the goldfish from the fair dies, right? It's like, oh my gosh, now what do you do? But having that way to express and acknowledge the grief is super important. Unresolved loss is really hard. We're not often really paying attention to loss and grief in adoption. Oftentimes what we're doing is celebrating. We celebrated Plain Day or Gotcha Day. This is such a wonderful day. You came home to us, but not recognizing the loss, not sort of understanding that that also needs to be recognized. When somebody dies, usually there's a funeral. In my family, that means there's a lot of food afterwards. but in adoption, it's not usually recognized. When that's not recognized, it often interferes with forming new attachments and making it possible to move on. The symptoms of ambiguous loss might look a lot like those of PTSD, which is a real common diagnosis given to children in therapy, come into therapy through adoption or foster care. So we're going to do a little loss exercise.
All
Edna,
right.
do you want to lead this?
Yes, I will. This is one of my favorite. Thank you, Lisa. This is an exercise. And some of you may have done this before, but I want each of you to take out a piece of paper and a pen. I want you to take a few moments to put yourself in this scenario. Just imagine you're sitting in your living room one evening and there's a knock on your door. You answer the door and a person you don't know well tells you that you're going to be moving. You will not be returning to the current home that you're in, ever, never. The person will not tell you where you're going. A moving truck is outside your home, and you have less than 10 minutes to choose 10 items or people to take with you. I'd like for you on that piece of paper list those 10 items or 10 people that you would take with you. So if you take just a minute and list those on that piece of paper, who or what items, objects would you take with you? What would they be loading on this moving truck? Okay, I'll give you just a few more seconds. Make a list of those 10 items or people you're going to be moving and never, ever to return. So Lisa, let's go to the next slide. So hopefully you've listed those 10 things. Now the woman tells you that she realizes there's not enough room in that truck to fit all you want to bring with you. That truck's gotten smaller, as you can see. So you must remove 5 items and or people from your list. So right now, I want you to cross off 5 items from that list you just made. So if you take a few seconds, please cross 5 items off that list. And lo, there's still no room. I mean, that truck has filled up. You can only take yourself and 2 items. So I want you to cross off 3 of those 5 items. That truck can only take you and 2 people or items. Can you cross those off? So let's reflect on this. How are you feeling? What are you feeling about this exercise? Feel free to put it in the chat box. Not leaving the cat or the dog behind. Hey, those pets are important. Absolutely. Anxious, sad, devastating, despair. Don't like it. My kids outrank my husband. Sad. Loss, angry, anxious, lots of emotions, hopeless. I'm just curious. What did you give up? Confused? What did you give up? Were there any things in particular that you gave up? Anxious, hopeless, alone. Oh, lots of strong emotions. Gave up my
pets.
Yeah.
Oh, 3 children, my pets and pictures. Yikes. That's hard.
My dogs and my husband. tangible things, all the tangible things they gave up. But obviously that person kept the people, those things.
Figuring
Yeah.
out how to smuggle in a third cat.
Yeah. Most people choose to take their loved ones. But for children and youth who are removed from their families, the first thing that is taken away from them is people, right? When you think about all of the movements and moving from place to place, their attachments are lost because those are immediately taken from them. So my question to you is, what did you learn from this exercise that will help you understand the loss and grief experienced by children or youth in care? What did you learn? Type that in the chat box as well. Lisa and I so look forward to being able to doing this exercise face to face. I think we'll be doing it in New Orleans again in hot July. But yeah, we'd love to hear people be able to talk. No control. Lisa, did I miss any?
Yeah, would not have a clue how to cope. Would grasp for some control. Learn how deeply loss can affect you. Yeah, and this is an exercise, right? Frozen in the moment. And oftentimes our kids don't have the ability to choose people. I mean, really, they almost never do.
Yeah.
Sometimes siblings are moved together, but oftentimes they're not. Yeah, the impact of loss. Yeah. Children have been removed from their birth families, experience many losses and lose trust in others, for sure.
Absolutely. And this, of course, is one of the exercises built into NTI. Again, some of you probably have done this before. What we've heard was that this exercise, which is only an exercise, it's not real. It's really hard and provokes real strong feelings in our, and sometimes in our experiences, several attendees refused to do the exercise. They said that it was too far difficult to choose. And for some, it was even triggering. So it really has some deep meaning and implications. And I stress that Sophie's choice, yes, absolutely. This is something you may want to do with even some of your parents or with your staff in terms of this exercise. So thank you so much for participating. So what can we do? We have to somehow find ways to help minimize the impact of loss and grief. It's so important in our work. We have to help parents to understand and process their own loss and grief, allow those opportunities to really share and talk about that, and also help children and youth process and manage their feelings of loss and grief. And NTI has several tools that you can use to do this. It's built so many tools and resources packed in for you to do that. Let's look at one tool. Let's look at this tool for helping children and youth process their feelings of loss. In his book, Being Adoptive, David Brzezinski talks about grief and loss for adopted children using a metaphor of keeping losses in a box. Sometimes you can keep the box closed, sitting in a corner without much thought. Other times you feel like you can keep the box, you can feel like opening the box, peeking inside to explore that loss and then close it up. The box is always there, sitting in the corner, sometimes out of sight and sometimes right there in front of you. This would be a great project to use with children on your caseload, or to teach a parent how to use a loss box to help their child understand their feelings. A loss box can help children and youth express and contain their losses, honor them, gain mastery over them, and ultimately offers a way to find symbolic closure to move on. So all kinds of items and things can go into this loss box, and it can be revisited. It's sort of a way to maintain and really master the losses, so to speak. We have several other tools. Lisa, let's talk about those.
Yeah, exactly. We've got several other tools built in to help children process their losses, and really also for families and caseworkers to be able to talk about it with kids as well. Sometimes it's kind of hard to bring up loss and grief, right? We don't want to make a child feel sad. We don't want to bring up something that they might not already be thinking of. When my children were small, they sent them to a Korean culture camp in the area. And I often went in to say to the organizers, I think we should be talking about adoption. They did all kinds of Korean cultural activities. And when I said we should be talking about adoption, the organizers were like, oh no, we want these kids to be happy the whole time they're here. We don't want them to think about something that they're probably not thinking of. But there were 500 Korean adopted children in the same space together. There was no way that they weren't thinking about how alike they were with other adopted kids and how adoption had affected their life. They were children from the age of 5 to 18. And to not talk about adoption seemed a little silly to me. But I think the organizers didn't really have an idea of how to do that. So some of the tools that we use are life books, and I'm sure many of you have heard of life books before. Digital stories, the kids love these because they love technology, and you can do this on your computer. Making a storyboard or a journey map, these are all really great ways to help the child tell their story from their perspective, right? It's not really about us trying to correct what their perspective is, but helping them to share what they know, and then maybe at a later time helping them to fill in the blanks. So some really great tools built into NTI. Oh, here we go. Now we're going to hear from C.A.S.E. Thomas. I am so excited to have you here today, C.A.S.E., and again, appreciate your willingness to share how you've used NTI at C.A.S.E. So take it away.
Okay, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I have been in the child welfare space for over 2 decades. I am also the adoptive mom of 4 children who experienced significant trauma before they came into my home. So I'm talking to you today, both as a professional and as a mom. So I thought I would start by giving you all a little context about my organization, which is called C.A.S.E. I think it's helpful for you to understand how we have used NTI at C.A.S.E. if you understand a little bit about what C.A.S.E. does. So C.A.S.E's mission is to help children heal from trauma by strengthening their families. Children who have been hurt by abuse, neglect, grief, and loss recover best when they are working through their hard histories in a family as opposed to in a residential environment, ideally. Oftentimes, parents in those homes, whether they are foster, adoptive, kinship caregivers, or even parents who have been reunified with their children after removal, they're taken by surprise at just how hard it is to help a child heal. On top of that, these caregivers are often carrying the burden of their own unhealed trauma. C.A.S.E. comes alongside these families to help put them on a path of healing. Okay, Lisa, next slide, please. C.A.S.E. does whatever it takes to prevent breakdown in foster, adoptive, kinship, and reunified families by connecting them to a community of experts, resources, and other families. By doing this, we have witnessed extraordinary outcomes when our trauma responsive practitioners intercede by exhausting every resource at our disposal. Our work is rooted in clinical practice and research with evidence-based programs, and we are committed to collaborating with all of the professionals involved with the family so that there is a continuum of care. Whether that means we are talking to teen school about how to make the classroom trauma informed, to calling 17 different psychiatric practices to make sure that a kiddo's medications are refilled after being reunified to his birth mom, we use this multidisciplinary approach every single day. Because we get extremely granular in our work with families, we see gaps in programming that is available to these families. And when we see gaps, we get creative. We've authored some of our own curriculum to help parents improve things like executive functioning and mirror neurons. We've figured out how to teach an adoptive mom about attachment while she's living in a very resource dry area and doesn't know how to read. Finally, our work with families is rooted in compassion. Approximately 65% of our staff, like me, has lived experience, so we are helping families from a place of understanding. Okay, next slide, please. In the last 6 years, we have been extremely successful in preventing placement breakdown, decreasing trauma-related behaviors, and improving caregiver stress levels. Permanency in a safe, loving, attachment-rich home will always be Chosen's goal. We call our outcomes the Chosen effect because of the impact that our model of care has had on families. We are stabilizing families, we're keeping kids out of hospitals, we're decreasing trauma-related behaviors, and we are increasing a caregiver's understanding of attachment. Okay, next slide. So I told you that the Chosen effect has transformed the lives of our families. Because of our successful outcomes, we've had the opportunity to scale across the country. Our scaling efforts have succeeded in large part because of what I like to call the NTI effect on Chosen's model of care. So at Chosen, we have a very robust recruitment process so that we are hiring the most qualified child welfare professionals and therapists so that our families are getting the best service possible. We have found over the last 6 years that often, even the most qualified staff are not foster care and adoption competent. So the NTI training has helped equip the child welfare and the therapeutic professionals on our staff with the understanding that they need to serve our population well. Over the years, we've trained about between 25 to 30 staff using NTI and about 25 interns using NTI as well. We have found that universities are simply not training therapists and social workers to be foster care and adoption competent. So we have a lot of work to do when they come to us. NTI's engaging, robust, and accountability-centric training is like no other. We so appreciate their approach to teaching. With the interactive modules and the multifaceted approach, our staff not only completes the training, but they remember what they have been taught. Before we found NTI, our experience was like what Lisa and Ed referred to earlier, that our staff was only remembering about 10% of what we taught them. But with NTI, the interactive nature of it makes the concepts stick. This is an unusual characteristic of continuing education in our space. There are so many reasons to love this training, but today I'm going to focus on 5 areas. They are competency, grief and loss, diversity education, supporting parents and caregivers, and supplemental resources. So I'm going to walk through these 5 categories with you in the next few minutes with explanation and real life stories of impact. So the first reason that I'm such a big fan of this training is that it helps professionals become competent in adoption and foster care concepts. As I said, after years of working in this space and years of having a significant rotating intern program with multiple universities sending social work and counseling interns to us, we've realized that training our direct care staff is our responsibility. It's not the responsibility of the universities because I don't know why they're doing it, but they typically do not have the resources and the programming to educate in this manner. So to serve our families that are coming to Chosen the best, we can't depend on experience or education to get the families to the place where they need to be. So as a result, every single direct care staff takes the training. We've also had our staff who is in charge of our social media and our messaging take this training as well, so that when they are putting content out that has to do with our programming or even just announcements, we want to make sure that everyone is being sensitive to the issues in foster care and adoption. So when our staff and our interns finish the training and they become adoption competent, it helps them raise that baseline of emotions in the families that they're working with, so that the parents can begin working on the mental health of the children that they're parenting. When misconceptions about foster care and adoption are allowed to perpetuate, healing simply cannot begin. Whether that is a caseworker telling a child in foster care that he should be grateful that his foster family brought him in and that should make him want to stop running away, or it's a foster family expecting an attitude of thankfulness from the child as soon as that child walks through the door after being removed from their first family. We have to be educating our staff on issues that impact foster and adopted children. Misunderstandings and assumptions about how these children should act or how they're feeling can trigger additional behaviors and even additional trauma. When that happens, healing and progress toward mental health simply can't happen. The education that NTI provides so that professionals have an understanding of these issues is absolutely essential. There are so many myths around foster care and adoption. Whether it's the fact that a child who was adopted as an infant won't struggle with trauma-related behaviors, or that it's okay not to tell that same adopted child who was adopted as an infant that they were actually adopted. NTI not only busts those myths, but it gives clear trauma-informed reasons why the perpetuation of those myths are actually harmful to children. At Chosen, we have found that tearing down these misconceptions with caseworkers, caregivers, and even teachers that we're working with on behalf of the family can be very difficult. Well, the NTI training equips our staff to have those really difficult conversations. With interactive thought questions and quality videos in the training, our staff feels empowered to talk with a family about a myth that needs to be busted. One family we know adopted a child out of foster care around the age of 12 months old. She was drug exposed while in the womb. We began working with this adoptive family when the little girl was 8. This family had come to us asking for our help because they were really struggling with her challenging behaviors, as they didn't experience those similar behaviors with their biological children. Well, when we began working with the family, it was clear that attachment to their adopted daughter wasn't nearly as strong as it could be. Then we discovered that the entire family knew she was adopted, but she did not. With the equipping that the NTI training gave to the social worker working with the family, as well as our therapist on staff who had taken the clinical track, both of those staff members felt very equipped to gently begin the conversation with the parents about considering telling her that she was adopted. It took about 3 months of preparation, but the family finally sat this little girl down and told her in an attachment-focused, trauma-responsive manner. The little girl was surprised and sad and started that grieving process, but I know that she's going to be better off knowing her story that belongs to her, not to her adoptive parents. I truly believe that our staff was better equipped for the situation because of going through the NTI training. Okay, next slide. So grief and loss is the next category of NTI that I want to highlight. It is my favorite aspect of the training by far. The NTI training explains, again, with this multi-dimensional interactive approach, that there will always be grief and loss in foster care and adoption. While this seems like a common sense type of concept, it's not. Unknowingly, our culture focuses on the gains in adoption. For example, you hear the child got a forever family. The parents added a child to their family. The agency found a placement. Do you hear it in that subtle language? The focus is on what is gained in foster care and adoption in the language we use in our culture. The feel-good stories that we read about in the news and on social media and the movies about adoption rarely talk about the loss. There are not always gains in foster care and adoption, but there is always loss 100% of the time. So if this is true, why aren't most of our universities equipping our child welfare professionals and therapists to handle what's true all of the time? I don't know, but that's why we need NTI, because NTI does it really, really well. So first of all, the NTI training helps professionals understand the losses that children who have experienced trauma face. There are interactive exercises. You just saw one earlier. They're so powerful, and they help drive this point home. Invariably, our clinical staff who has just completed the training will say to me, "Gosh, I never thought about what the child was losing. I only thought they were getting a new start in life." So on top of this, the NTI training helps trainees understand how harmful it is to forget the loss of the first or the birth family. Often, birth parents who have lost custody of their children are demonized. While NTI doesn't excuse the documented valid reasons for removal of children from unsafe situations, the training does help professionals learn to view first families through a lens of compassion, teaching that birth families who have had children removed are often suffering from generational cycles of trauma and were in foster care themselves. And when our staff gets that NTI training, they can carry that lens of compassion to the parents that they're working with. Think about that beautiful trickle-down effect that happens when everybody starts viewing each other through that lens of compassion. Finally, the training reminds professionals of the losses that adoptive, foster, and kinship caregivers have experienced. Many parents who struggle with infertility turn to adoption to grow their families. Foster parents experience the loss of a calm, quiet home. And kinship caregivers sometimes lose relationships with other members of their family because they agree to parent the children who are in their home. This is especially true for grandparents raising grandchildren. The training explains all of this so well by helping trainees consider the view of all parties involved in child welfare. One of the best stories I have to illustrate how the training on grief and loss impacted our staff is that of a young lady named Tina. Tina was removed from her birth family at the age of 10 years old. After moving through 7 different foster homes, she ended up being adopted by the 8th foster family at the age of 16. Her adoptive parents were wonderful, and they have pursued attachment with her, and she's now on a path of healing. At 18 years old today, her parents recently came to Chosen for help. Her parents have helped her navigate the last couple of years. They've helped her navigate this transition of walking into adulthood so well. They've walked alongside of her as she got accepted into a community college, and they made an apartment in their basement that has an external door to the outside so that she can slowly learn how to live independently. But they came to us because her behaviors have started to backslide, and she started to seem resistant to the plan, even though she was excited about it for the last several months. The member of our staff working with this family helped these parents see that even moving to the basement was yet another loss for her. By reframing for Tina's parents that this transition into adulthood included the loss of childhood and the first safe home that she had ever lived in, they better understood her resistance and that her behaviors were simply strategies to cope with the impending transition. With this understanding, the parents are now better able to reassure her and comfort her as she approaches a significant developmental milestone. Our staff member credited NTI's powerful teaching on grief and loss for the ability to identify that and show that to Tina's parents. Okay, next slide. All right, so the next area of NTI that I so appreciate is the teaching on diversity. At Chosen, about half of the families we serve are transracial families. And I can't think of one transracial family we've served who are well equipped to parent children who are of a different race or culture. In fact, most of the parents who come to us for help are exacerbating their children's behaviors by inadvertently not handling issues of race well. I would further say that not handling race issues well keeps children from getting to that baseline that I talked about earlier, from which healing can happen. It is crucial that we teach parents how to handle issues of diversity well. You have very likely completed diversity training within your own organization, but the NTI training helps us understand how to handle issues of diversity in an adoption competent way. Similar to what I said about busting myths about adoption competency, when transracial families handle issues of diversity in a trauma-informed manner, that baseline from which to help healing from trauma is established. We have found that youth who have a different race than their foster or adoptive parents struggle with their identities. This is a concept that is foreign to most parents. They tend to believe that the only identity the child needs is that of being in the new family. The NTI training does an absolutely fantastic job of reminding professionals that children in the child welfare system need to form their identity as an individual. Very often, this involves consideration of the first family's culture, race, ethnicity, and traditions. Foster and adoptive families often want to simply replace the child's first family history with the identity of their family. My own adopted daughter, who does not share my race, once said this to me: "I know you love me, but that love doesn't erase or cover up my history." NTI teaches that this tendency to replace first family identity with current family identity is hurtful and actually re-traumatizing. The NTI module on diversity is so helpful in reminding professionals that they can come alongside transracial caregivers and help them identify ways to embrace diversity within the home. Whether that's going to a church that reflects the race of the child, or it's cooking food that's culturally competent, awareness is so important. The NTI training has this fantastic video of a white mom talking to her adult adopted son who's Black. In the video, he reflects on his childhood and talks about how he just wanted to fit in. But after he was adopted, he was only around white people. They lived in a white neighborhood, he went to a white school, and they went to a white church. Nikki, a member of our staff, said that until she saw that video, she just didn't understand how important it was for teens to feel like they fit in. Now, when working with transracial families, Nikki always shows that video to the family. Tara, another member of our staff, was working with a family who had adopted a boy we will call Ben. He's Black. He was adopted by a white family living in a white county. The family enrolled Ben in an all-white private school with their biological children, wanting to give Ben the same opportunities that their other children had had. Even though Ben was happy to be in a home after living in a residential setting for many years, Going to school was not his favorite thing to do. He was struggling with depression. He had no friends, and he was unmotivated to do his schoolwork. One day, the school called his parents and told them that his hair was distracting to the other students and he needed to shave it. Because Tara, our staff member, had completed the NTI training, she felt equipped to have a conversation with the parents about the racism that Ben was experiencing at the school and encouraged them to consider moving him to a different school 30 minutes away, where he would be in a school with other kids who look like he does. For the first time, they realized that trying to replace Ben's racial identity rather than embracing his identity with that of the adoptive family was hurting him. So they moved him to a different school, and today he's thriving there. Okay, next slide. Another aspect of the NTI training that is so powerful is how it teaches therapists and child welfare professionals to reset their expectations, as well as how to help parents reset expectations. When foster and adoptive parents set standards that are arbitrary or based on their own histories, healing in the child is often hindered. The NTI training teaches on the foundation of attachment, which is a concept that professionals are often not educated in. The exercises, and you saw some of them earlier, they equip professionals to be able to identify attachment struggles between children and the adults who are parenting them. The training equips our team to coach parents around ways to promote healthy attachment. When these attachments are strengthened, parents can become partners in mental health with their children. Our therapists and social workers can encourage parents with tools and techniques that put their children on a path of healing. There's an exercise in the training that is called Key Aspects for Engaging Families. This is something that our staff refers to frequently when families are struggling. The other aspect of the NTI training and supporting parents is the consistent strengths-based approach that it takes. While university programs do a great job with teaching strengths-based approaches, NTI applies those concepts to adoption and foster care, and our staff finds that extremely helpful. We worked with a foster mom, her name was Anne, who ended up adopting a little girl at the age of 5. Her daughter had experienced significant sexual abuse before entering foster care. And by the time the adoption was final, Anne's daughter was exhibiting aggressive and sexualized behaviors. Anne felt like she was swimming in a sea of judgment. The people in her neighborhood, the workers at the school, the after-school daycare, and the gym all criticized her. She received unsolicited advice from people she barely knew and who didn't know her daughter's history. She felt like she couldn't go anywhere. She felt completely isolated. She expressed the fact to us that she was so surprised as to how little support she was getting as a foster parent. She walked into foster care thinking that she would have all of this help. In fact, she felt like she was all alone. There's a quote from a single mom in the NTI training that expresses a similar feeling. Our staff was able to share that quote from the training with Anne, and for the first time, her feelings were validated. Simply having that quote on the screen from the NTI training made a huge difference in this mom feeling like she could keep going. Okay, next slide. The last part of the NTI training that I want to talk about are all the supplemental resources and handouts available in it. These supplements are invaluable to our staff. There are handouts that allow staff to dive more deeply into a concept. Our staff's favorites are the reframing behavior handouts and the assessing attachment readiness handout. We use that assessing attachment readiness handout when parents are really struggling with attachment to their children. It's so helpful in moving those hard conversations that can be hard with parents forward. With NTI's emphasis on equipping the caregiver to be an agent of healing for their children, there are resources on the different therapeutic modalities so that staff can learn more about them. These additional resources have helped our staff educate parents so that they're better able to search for the specific professionals that their children need. As I said to you, this training has been invaluable to our staff. We've trained 25, 30 staff in it and about 25 interns. We could not be doing the work that we're doing and growing the way we are without this training. So I urge you all to use it with your teams and your staff, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stacy. My gosh, we want to just take you on the road with us. What a great presentation and example of how NTI is being used and applied in your organization. Thank you so much. So we do have a couple of questions, Stacy, one of which is, how accessible are your services to families? And is there a sliding fee schedule?
Yes, we do have a sliding scale, and we have a telehealth model. We're in several states across the nation, but when we started our programming, we were using Zoom in 2016, well before COVID, because we wanted to make sure that our services were accessible to lots and lots of people. So you can go to our website, and it's really easy to figure out how to make a referral or get more information about our services.
Great.
Stacey, what is your website? I'll put that in the chat.
Sure. It is www.chosen.care. Chosen.care.
And definitely, if you want more information, please refer to that. Thank you, Lisa. Another comment that immediately came about was when you were talking about not disclosing that the child was adopted. I mean, there was several comments about that, and some of which said, in 20 years, I've never heard of that. So do you want to share a little bit more about that, Stacy?
Oh my goodness. I wish I had the number for you. Over the years, we've served close to 1,100 households over the last 6 years. And there, if I could guess, I would say probably 25 to 30 households had not told their children that they were adopted.
Wow.
So that's just one of those myths that we got to go bust, because we tell families all the time that story belongs to your child, not you. And again, it's why the grief and loss approach that the NTI training takes is so fantastic, because it resets the thinking that it's all about the adoptive parent or it's all about the foster parent. And truly, those stories and the information about the child's history, it belongs to the child's, not to the parent. So
yes, thank you, Stacy. Francine has a question. It sounds great in terms of NTI. One complaint I hear is how much time the trainings take, and we hear this as well. Any ideas about that argument, Stacy?
Yes, and my staff, they say the same thing. This takes a long time. So some things that we have done is we'll make a timeline for staff and say, okay, we want you to get modules 1 and 2 done in May, and then you're going to get 2 and 3 done in June. That has worked really well if we break it up into bite-sized pieces. We've also had groups of people do it together. Makes it a little bit, more fun when they're like both on Zoom doing it together. But I think just breaking it up into bite-sized pieces is the best way. One other tip I'll give is when you look at the layout of NTI, it's so great because it does tell you the anticipated time it's going to take for each module. So I'll say to a staff member, okay, if this particular month you're not going to have a lot of margin or extra time, do the module that doesn't take as much time as some of the other ones.
Okay. Sounds good. And William says it's all great stuff. If you pace yourself, it is absorbed better. And you're right. Several states are say, for example, within a 3-month time frame, staff have to complete so many modules per month. And at the end of, say, the first 3 modules, they do a transfer of learning type activity, which they continue throughout. So yeah, you do have to pace yourself, and maybe not spread it out too long, because you want the learning to be more, I guess, current and that sort of thing, because there are pre and post tests embedded within. But thank you, Stacy. Any other questions or comments before we close out Stacy's segment? And again, thank you so much, Stacy. What a wonderful presentation. And her contact is here. What does chosen mean? I think you missed this. Does chosen help people throughout the U.S.? That's what someone just posted. Sorry, Sarah.
Yes, we do. We help all over the country using a telehealth model.
Great. Wonderful. So Stacy's contact information is there. Thank you so much again, Stacy. Let's keep it on push, Lisa, because we want to wrap up. With respect to what we have promised, Stacy talked a little bit about some of the tools and resources embedded within NTI. There are so many of them. So we've had the great fortune of having so many tools and resources available to you. So here's just a few of them, but is jam-packed with much, much, much more. So let's go to the next one. Next slide, Lisa. If you're interested, I love this kid. If you're interested, we are so happy, Lisa and I, as implementation specialists, to be assigned to states to provide specific support. I have 25 states, one of which Lisa and I share, Texas, and I have Georgia, and Lisa has others as well. So we're available to continue the support throughout September of 2023. Now, if your state, agency, entity, or tribe is interested, or if you have contacts in other states that you might believe be interested in NTI, please contact us. Lisa is putting our contact information in the chat box, and it's also at the end of the slide. We would love, love, love to talk to you more, and we're here to provide all kinds of support to you. Let's talk about how to access NTI, Lisa. Next slide. Okay, how do you access it? It's immediately available. If you go to our website, www.adoptionsupport.org/NTI/access, you can absolutely get to the C.A.S.E LMS. For individuals, you can click on individuals and access it via our C.A.S.E LMS, which is online. Your NASW CEUs are free through that access. And of course, we have it through our federal government virtual platform, which is CapLearn. Also, we are working with states who have chosen to put NTI on their learning management systems, such as the state of Texas is one of them, and others that Lisa and I have worked with, so that they will have NTI embedded right on their own learning management systems. We can work with you to make that happen. The transfer of files is free, so we can talk more about that as well. But you do have immediate access to NTI right now, and we also have help desk support. So next slide, Lisa. And we hope that you'll check it out. Check out NTI, do a couple of modules and see how you feel about it. We have also on our website a national directory of NTI trained professionals. So in essence, folks, especially clinicians and therapists who have completed NTI, are now a part of our national directory. Say, for example, you're a therapist and you've completed NTI and you're interested in becoming a part of our directory, national directory. You can do that by uploading your completion, your certificate of completion, documentation, and all of the key information, and we will include you in our directory. I've had several calls about Edna, who in the state of Ohio has taken NTI. and I'm able to refer them back to our National Directory of Trained Professionals. So if you've taken NTI as a therapist, please go in and have us include you in our National Directory. Next slide. So are there any questions, anything that we have not covered? Put it in the chat box, and Lisa will be taking a peek at that. And again, we are available to respond to your questions since you have our email addresses that Lisa has shared as well. So next slide. This is a series. Right now we're scheduled through August, and I'm sure we'll be adding more webinars of our NTI Transfer of Learning Tuesday. Our next webinar is June 21st. Same time, same bat station, from 2 o'clock to 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And what we're going to be focusing on is applying NTI key concepts and tools using therapeutic parenting strategies to assess challenging behavior. And this is our featured speaker, who's out of the state of New York. She is a therapist and board president of the Adoptive and Foster Family Coalition of New York. She'll be our featured presenter. So go online, register, join us for another session, really talking about transfer of learning and some of NTI's tools and concepts. Next slide. I think the next slide is the final slide.
Yep, okay, we have a question
Yes.
for Stacy. Do you offer support groups for adoptive parents?
Well, the first thing I would do is tell you to check out the Center for Adoption Support and Education support groups, because they have really, really great ones. If they're in the, if your parents that you're looking for in that Washington, D.C., Maryland area, those support groups are live and really, really good. Aren't they live, Edna and Lisa? Yeah.
Yes.
We have toyed around with support groups for adoptive parents, and we did a lot of them at the height of COVID in 2020. And after COVID died down, they just weren't super well attended. So we stopped them. We do feel like there are lots of support group options out there. So no, we are not doing that right now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Lisa, you want to close us out?
Okay, well, thank you so much, Stacy. Really appreciate your sharing. I love the stories, really illustrate how NTI has helped your staff have a better understanding. Just really so appreciate you. And here is our contact information. There were a couple questions about how to get onto NTI and access. And if you are in an agency, again, that wants to implement this with your staff, Edna and I, it's our job to help you do that. Whether you decide to access it through our C.A.S.E learning management system or for free, upload it into your learning management system, we can assist you in both things. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Again, hoping you'll join us next time. And if you have any questions or things that you'd like to know about, please do reach out to Edna or I. We'll be really happy about that. At the end of this, there will be a pop-up survey. When you complete the survey, you will get a link to the certificate of completion. So we will say goodbye and wait for that survey to pop up, complete it, and you'll get your certificate, okay? Thanks so much, everybody. Great to see you this afternoon. Have a good weekend, a good week.
Mm-hmm.